Welcome back, Spectres. This is your host, Tom or Robots, with my good buddy and co-host, Sam or N7 Legend, now officially. Welcome back, dude.
That's right. I think I got a couple more weeks before Twitch lets me change it back to N7 Legend. They only let you change your name so often. But very happy to be here, and we got quite the show planned. I'm super psyched for this topic. I don't know about you, Tom.
Yeah,
I certainly am.
Yeah. So today we're just getting right into this, man. Today we're talking about the Quarians and the Geth War. Fun times as usual. I'm sure this won't be any more depressing or controversial in any way. This is going to be just a clear cut all the way across, right? Nothing. Oh yeah. Nothing shady going on here. So yeah, this is
another war.
Yet another war, another topic. So let's just kick it off. Let's get right into it. So, what is going on with the Quarians and the Geth?
Well, the Quarians created the Geth. I think that's, first of all, that's what people should know. If you're brand new to the series, you might not know either of those names, but the Quarians are a race of intelligent aliens, and they create the Geth. So those are a synthetic race. And the first thing that you need to know about the Quarians is that they have always been technologically advanced, even compared to the Asari and the Turians, although they found the Citadel a little bit later than the Asari did.
While we kick this off, I don't know if you could hear it come through the microphone, but it is thundering outside my home. So two things. One, it means it's officially Florida, summer here in Florida. Two, actually three things. Two, that's a wonderful setting for like making this not an ominous topic at all. And three, if the power goes out, I apologize. I'll be back up as soon as possible.
I will do my best to run the show in your stead. So
right. Well, it'll kick off the stream too. So, but we'll make it work if I go away and I don't respond anytime soon, then we'll just have to make this work another night. But anyway, let's move on. So so the Quarians create the Geth. What's going on with that?
So the other thing that we need to dive into before discussing why the Quarians created the Geth is that family is equal to religion for the Geth for the Quarians rather, in terms of cultural importance. And they've actually merged their technological prowess with their priorities of family and religion. So they practice ancestor worship. And they've kind of like combined these two spheres into this type of preservation of ancestors' minds, that kind of thing.
Weird.
And according to the wiki, the Quarians used it to their goal was to make sure that they never lost any wisdom of any of the ancestors that they ever had. And verbatim, the wiki says, this involved taking a personality imprint from the individual and developing it into an interface similar to a VI. The Quarians began experimenting with making these imprints more and more sophisticated, hopefully leading to the wisdom of their ancestors being preserved in an imprint that could be truly intelligent.
So I immediately have multiple feelings about this. First of all, this seems very similar to what happens in Cyberpunk 2077 with the relic and the ability to it's soul ripping is it's a phrase like that, but it's basically taking somebody's personality and their memories and digitizing it. So this is a concept that floats around in these kinds of circles, not just with video games, but like technology and these kinds of things. Like, what if we could actually do that with ourselves? Secondly, the ancestor worship and veneration is actually a very primitive type of worship that many human cultures, I would even almost say most, probably if you go back far enough, practiced in some ways. The idea that the belief that your ancestors, after they passed on, would somehow stay with us and were worth venerating makes a lot of sense. So you come to rely on the older people who helped raise you. And so you would want to hold on to that wisdom and those kinds of things. Another thing that I find really interesting about this, though, is that sometimes the information that we have from our ancestors isn't really wisdom in the sense of wisdom. It's just old traditions that work for a time different from our own, right? So I can see how this might cause some problems.
I think this is a hot take, and this is a bit maybe of an unpopular opinion, but just because they were your ancestor doesn't mean they were a good person. I'm sure I have some ancestors in my own bloodline who are probably better off dead for the world.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, probably all of us do. There are people out there, and hopefully we have a way of understanding the difference between those things. Especially in a situation like this. But at the same time, just because something was at one point considered wisdom doesn't mean it will at all points in time be considered wisdom. So, for example, believing in ghosts. Let's just use this as an example. Like, maybe it was wise to believe in ghosts before we had the science to explain things that we didn't understand. And then once you develop the science to explain those things, the belief in ghosts should go away because it's not actually true or verifiable. So therefore, moving on with, reclassifying what used to be wisdom as something else might be beneficial, right?
The definition of wisdom certainly evolves.
Right. But the keeping of that information isn't necessarily wrong or bad. In fact, it's probably good to have all of that information and just update our teaching around it to clarify what things should be considered valuable and what things are, takes from a different time. So anyway, a large little rabbit trail here, but let's move on with this.
But yeah, it kind of comes full circle because it's a theme with the Quarians. They're afraid of losing the wisdom, so they invent a problem, or they invent a solution to solve that problem. And the theme is, when there's a problem, they invent a way to solve it. They're very industrious that way as a race. Another example of this is the Quarians have very weak immune systems, and that comes from, number one, their home world's arid climate has a lack of microbes and viruses. So that, compared to other worlds, has produced a weak immune system in the Quarians. And number two, centuries living aboard sterile ships in the migrant fleet has also resulted in their weak immune systems. And what did the Quarians do to combat this? Well, they invented state-of-the-art envirosuits and advanced medical technology with crazy vaccinations, antibiotics, preventative stim injections, you name it, and they have it. And so they rely on their technology heavily when there's a problem. And during the course of their race's growth and expansion, they run into a labor shortage, which is actually, a predicted outcome in all developed societies, running into a labor shortage. Because as a society develops, the population growth declines. And that's just a natural way of things. So what do the Quarians do? They turn to technology again. And eventually they create a race of robotic help called the Geth. And in Quarian, Geth means servant of the people. Which,
again, side trail, like rabbit trail here. Most of humanity, the progress of human beings has been on the backs of people who are typically considered the servant or slave class in that society. If you look at any well-developed society across the planet, there's always a group that is considered the aristocracy and at least one other group that is considered the servant class, and they are the majority of the people, or the slave class, and they are the majority of the people. And it's only due to the work of that group that we are able to progress technologically, culturally, because what that does is it creates the time for the aristocracy to do other things, like make art, to write, to do science, to do all these other things. So it would make sense in an advanced enough technological civilization with liberal enough politics that raise everyone up above this level, that you would need something else to do the mundane work that nobody wants to do. So this concept of creating a robotic servant class, to automate that, makes sense. I mean, we're kind of moving towards that in some ways, but our society hasn't quite gotten past this idea that, working at McDonald's for minimum wage isn't a livable thing. There's a lot of these political things that you can talk about around this, but wouldn't it be nice if everything that nobody wanted to do was automated, and the rest of us could then focus on higher goals. That seems ideal, but I have a feeling that this doesn't work out exactly how they wanted it to, right?
Yeah, and on that note,
thunder crashes in the background. Yeah,
it never does, especially in Mass Effect. Welcome to the Milky Way. But I challenge anyone on that note to say that the ultimate goal of human development isn't to work less. That is the ultimate goal. To work less and produce more. That is the goal.
Right. Or to make work more valuable. To work on the things that we truly value rather than the things that are necessary. And I think that and this is a philosophy I've kind of been like, just kind of side note here, like we're spitballing all sorts of stuff. But what's fun about these topics is that they do relate to philosophy and religion, these kinds of things. But this is one of those concepts. I was actually just thinking about this today or yesterday. This idea that the problems with so much of society isn't that we how do I want to phrase this? We are all seeking freedom, and we don't truly have freedom until we have the ability to choose how we spend our time. And it's not that people don't want to work, it's that people want their work to be in things that are valuable and have meaning. And when we are in a society where we have to focus on work that doesn't have meaning, that's when we become depressed. That's when we gain hopelessness. That's when it's tough to maintain our relationships with each other because we're emotionally stymied by it. This idea that, like, if we remove that and everyone can then have the freedom to work on the things that generally have meaning and seek meaning, then we might be able to raise society out of that. And we will solve things like certain types of issues that otherwise can't be solved. It's just one of those concepts. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this stuff, because again, I'm just spitballing, but it is not about leisure. It's not about, I want to spend more time playing a video game, because the truth is, if you could choose what you do all day long, at some point you would go, well, I don't need to play any more video games right now. I want to do something with my time that actually has a real world benefit. And I believe that most people would, thunder in the background, move away from that and would start devoting at least some of their time to actually working on things that make a difference. But anyway, fun things to think about.
I think you might be placing a little bit too much faith in humanity, but that's my own take.
Well, here's the other thing is that I think the people who don't move to that point will almost in a evolutionary way relegate themselves to this state of nothing. Like they will decline. And I don't know. I think that maybe there's I don't know. This is another topic we can talk about in the future, and I would love to chat with other people about this. But the older I get, the more I think that once you're past a certain age, you start to kind of focus on other things. Or if you're raised in a certain kind of society, that you would start to value things differently. But anyway, let's move on.
But about the Geth. So eventually, the Quarians keep their programming limited to virtual intelligence, because the Quarians themselves are acutely aware that developing AI is against Citadel law. It's illegal, and it's illegal for a reason. And they're aware of why it's taboo. So they keep the programming for the Geth limited to VI. But they keep asking them to do increasingly complex tasks, and they need to expand upon the programming for the robots to do those tasks. And eventually, the Geth become too intelligent for the Quarians' liking. And they start asking questions like, why was I created? Who am I?
So they have
is the universe
emergent intelligence. So even though they weren't programmed to be AI, the intelligence emerges simply from the complexity.
Right. And I think a part of it is because they teach the Geth to teach themselves. Mm-hmm. So those are the hallmarks of sentience. Those questions, why was I created? Who am I? And therefore personhood. Right. And so the Quarian government takes a look around after one employer, we'll call him, even though that's definitely not the right word, sees this, and there's fear when he sees it, and he reports it. And the Quarian government realizes this is illegal, and we know that the Quarians at this point have already met the council because they've lost the embassy there as punishment for creating the Geth and the subsequent threat that the Geth pose. But upon knowing that they created true AI, or what advocates on the Citadel call synthetic intelligence, because fun fact, in the Mass Effect political sphere, the term artificial intelligence is racist and it's offensive because it's saying that intelligence is less than because it's artificial,
right?
Because it's not real,
right?
So they create synthetic intelligence. And how do the Quarians react? They act out of shame and they act out of survival. And they decide that they need to destroy this creation before it destroys them and before the galaxy can know.
Which makes sense. I mean, in some ways, they're cleaning up the mess that they created, right? Like it's a cover up. They're seeking to cover it up, but at the same time, wouldn't the council demand that they destroy and remove it anyway?
They would. However, I think they were acutely aware of, like, okay, well, they were thinking if we can clean this mess up without anyone knowing and without us requesting help, it might be better for us politically in the long run.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Than admitting to our mess on the floor.
Yeah, but in both cases, the result would be the removal of the Geth, the destruction of a now intelligent synthetic species. In either case, it still goes that direction. One, they're trying to protect their butts, and the other, they're being open and honest with other people. So clearly, those would result in different things. But ultimately, the Geth get destroyed either way.
What I'm really curious about, and what there is surprisingly little written in the lore about, is why were those Citadel laws in place before this?
Yeah, what happened? Where did they learn that needed to be a thing? Yeah, that's a good question. You know what else I like about this is this idea that the awareness came from the complexity of the programming, and through the way that these things learned as they move forward. And that is actually there's a philosophy that is actually why we are intelligent, is because the complexity of our ability to process things was a necessary of development through the evolution of our species, and the complexity of our brains wasn't necessarily, evolution of our species thing. And that's what eventually led to self-awareness. So in a way, they created a synthetic stimulus, or they've created a synthetic framework that ran into the same complexity that allowed intelligence to occur. I'm wondering if I'm phrasing that correctly, but you guys get the idea, right? This idea that
they replicated the environment in which natural intelligence occurred, I think,
right, through a synthetic way to say it. Through a synthetic framework, which is interesting because that, by its nature, is actually more. I mean, it's more similar to biological intelligence in that way, at least. I have to wonder if there are different. Well, and this is another one of those crazy concepts. The idea that like an elephant is self-aware and a human is self-aware. Well, chances are an elephant might be self-aware. They've done a lot of studies on that. They've done studies on like dolphins and other apes and certain types of birds, and their sense of self-awareness. But is there a level to that? Is even among different humans, like different people of different mental abilities, is there more and less self-awareness, and does that make some of us more alive than others? Is that even a thing? Is it even worth classifying self-awareness as being a thing to value over species that don't have it? Why necessarily would that? I mean, both things are living things. Is just because one's self-aware and one isn't, does that necessarily mean that one should be valued over another? Like there's all these different kinds of thoughts around this, but it's interesting. Clearly, something that is self-aware is going to have complexity in its thoughts that make it more potentially dangerous than something that isn't, if it's threatened.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting the timeline of when this happened. So the Quarians create the Geth around the year 1850, the current era. So right before the United States is embroiled in a civil war.
Yeah, right.
So I always like putting these things in context. And It's also, as people in chat had mentioned, it's about 300 years before the events of Mass Effect 1.
Right. Right.
And Quarians also have a very similar lifespan to human beings, except if they are exposed to any type of virus or their suits become breached and they're infected with something. But other than that, they have very similar lifespans. So that being said, it's really not that old of history. By the time you get to Mass Effect 1, this is not ancient history to them. In fact, it's still pretty raw.
Yeah.
And so I kind of do want to like zoom out a little bit before we go any further, and I want to talk about like how the Geth themselves represent this theme, which is laden throughout the entire trilogy of Mass Effect, Andromeda excluded because of reasons.
Right.
But it's laden throughout the whole trilogy, and it's that the Geth themselves represent the theme of synthetic life versus organic life. Are they compatible? Is it copacetic to have them in the same universe together? Can they coexist? And can they do so peacefully? And the Geth are the first inkling of that. And I think it's pretty telling for the entire series that they are the first enemies you fight. Like from the get-go. That's the Geth. You meet them on Eden Prime. And it sets the entire stage for the ending of Mass Effect 3, which we can go into at a different time. But like we've already mentioned, where does one draw the line when defining what life is? Is it because this life is made of flesh and this life is made of metal? Because if we get into that, then I'm afraid that we're getting into laws of supremacy, and God knows how that ends, Yeah,
there's another theory I read not too long ago that the question, it all comes from the question of like, if there is intelligent life in the universe other than ourselves, then why have we not really come across it yet? Why don't we have clear signs of it? And the universe is the age that it is. It is very old. And then one thinker, I don't remember who the author was, talked about the idea that human life, or at least intelligent biological life, almost certainly will create intelligent artificial life. That if you take any system long enough, eventually intelligent biological life will basically create the Geth. The Geth will be an outcropping of our technology. AI will occur. And once AI occurs, there will be an event, inevitably, where that AI feels threatened by its biological creators and wins. And so at any point in the universe where you have intelligent life that gets advanced enough scientifically, eventually that life will go away. And throughout most of the rest of that existence, it's going to be synthetic life in whatever form that takes, which is amazing to think about, because think about how long we as humans have been intelligent life on this planet. Tens of thousands of years, a few 100,000 years. We've only really had culture for the last tens of thousands of years, like, actual culture with written down history in, 400 or 4,000, 5,000 years, if you consider like ancient Egypt and, Mesopotamia. Like it's such a speck of time on the whole list of everything. But then you end up with us creating an AI that eradicates us and then can live on forever, replicating itself, fixing itself, traveling across space, because lengths of time don't really matter to a synthetic being the way that they would matter to biological creatures. It becomes a whole other thing. So it's a crazy thing to think about. But inherently, that means that you would want a system that would downplay the development of that, because that would further our own destruction, if that's truly the case, which kind of explodes your brain a little bit.
I mean, yeah. And clearly, I think any human being would tell you organic life has its limitations. But the really, truly scary thing about AI is it doesn't. It doesn't have its limitations.
Right.
Or at least we can't fathom its limitations.
Yeah. Anything that can work synthetically can be augmented to live forever. if taken care of, or replicate itself indefinitely and spread across the universe. And then the question then becomes, okay, well, if that thing's out there, then why haven't we seen it yet? Or does it get to the point where it starts to look like things that are naturally out there? Like, oh, wait a minute. And then that gets really crazy. But anyway, these are really fun thoughts. Anything else before we move to the middle of the show?
That was pretty much it. Unless you wanted to do the show us your rider.
Yeah, let's do that in the middle. So we've got that, and then we've got after we get back from the middle, we'll talk about the Geth Wars, and we've got some reviews to go over. So why don't we move on?
Message coming in. Patching it through.
I am sovereign, and this station is mine.
All right.
The sound of that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Oh man, that's no good. All right, so let's talk about show us. Oh, you know what? I didn't show the picture. I need to show the picture on here. This is a Quarian and some Geth. Who is this?
Yes, this is actually Tally.
Oh, this is Tally. Okay, I wasn't
Tally,
sure.
Zora Vas Normandy. Before that, she's Vasnima, but she's aiming her pistol at some Geth. I can't remember the exact context to this, but something's telling me it's taking place on the Normandy in Mass Effect 3 when the Geth appear to offer their help to Shepard.
Yeah, so there you go. That's some Geth conflict right there. So we have a new rider this week. Let's check this out. I'm going to put this up on the screen for those of you who are watching during the live show or watching on YouTube later. And who is this? We've got, here, you can go ahead and talk about it, Sam.
Sure. This is the Penguin Ninja's rider. So thank you, Penguin Ninja, for sending this one in. Her name is Corey Ryder. She is a Recon Specialist, and the classes work a little bit differently in Andromeda. So if you can see this picture, I'll try to, if you can't rather see this picture, I'll try to describe it to you. But if you can see that it's more customizable. It's not dead set in stone, the classes, that the way they work. So this is a Recon Specialist with some biotic abilities, namely Singularity and Pull. Her background is, she's a Pathfinder because all of the characters in Andromeda, all the player characters are Pathfinders, so they're kind of set with their background in that context. But the psych profile for all of the writers is put together by Dr. Lexi Tapero into a document in the Codex, which it's pretty cool because the way that it works is it takes your decisions and your dialogue options and it combines them and basically formulates this type of profile for how you respond to things. And Corey Ryder's profile says, quote, "You exhibit heart and empathy in many situations. However, all this is completely in line with your tendency to act impulsively." I think that reads a little bit like a horoscope. Sure.
You're a little bit of everything. Congratulations.
Exactly.
Okay,
and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's so me.
It's so me. That's exactly right. I am stubborn when I don't want to do things, but flexible when I do.
I do get irritable when angry.
When I'm hungry, I'm kind of grumpy. Huh. No, everybody's kind of grumpy when they're hungry. Yeah. Well, cool.
But some of the key decisions that Corey Ryder made were she attempted peaceful first contact with the Ket. She chose peaceful scientific exploration of the Helios cluster, and she made peaceful contact with the Angara. She chose to save the Solarian Pathfinder on the Archon's ship, leaving behind the Krogans, and she successfully defeated the Archon and took control of Meridian. The Hyperion landed safely and is now being rebuilt as Port Meridian.
Cool.
So thank you, Penguin Ninja, for sending in your rider, Corey Ryder. And I hope all of you feel the inspiration to go ahead and send us your Shepherds before the Legendary Edition drops in, what is that, like 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's coming up very, very soon. Yeah, the 14th? Is that
4 weeks?
Something like that?
4 weeks.
Yeah, it's very soon. And thank you, Penguin Ninja. I hope you have a avatar somewhere because I would love to see a Penguin Ninja. If you do, send me a picture of that as well. So we also got some new reviews in this last week. If you want to help us out, we don't have a Patreon up or anything like that yet. We might do something like that in the future. But for right now, we're just asking you to do some things that don't cost you any money to help us out with the show. And one of those things is to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. If you happen to have an iTunes account, you can do that even if you don't listen on Apple Podcasts. And tell your friends. If you have friends who are into Mass Effect and want to listen to a podcast about the lore because they're getting back into the game, then please share us with them. But we've got 2 new reviews. The first one is from Dan Shargle in the United States, who writes, "Loving it," that's like McDonald's, right? Is that a thing? And the Twitch all of a sudden shuts down the stream. You can't use that. It says here, "I haven't played Mass Effect in years, but I'm looking forward to the remaster in May and the new one later this year." I don't know that the new one's coming out later this year, but that would be amazing. Maybe you know something we don't. So I was happy to stumble upon this new pod recently. Love hearing the background on the different races and characters, and the hosts do a good job of keeping it interesting without going all out nerd on the lore. Hey, we're not total nerds. That's great. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that, dude. And then we also have one from Drew Wassian, maybe is how you pronounce the name, from the US, who writes, "Love it." Not just loving it, love it. 5 stars. "I love everything about this podcast. I'm currently on my 6th playthrough of the Mass Effect series." 6. That's pretty intense. "I'm learning more in depth about the lore." I'm leaning more in depth into the lore. I don't know the right way to phrase that. "I love that you and Kung Fu Kangaroo really had different perspectives on things, and mainly y'all's opinions and backgrounds that really blend in well with the podcast. I definitely found the podcast by mistake while I was looking for a Mass Effect podcast and stumbled y'all, and it was totally worth it. Keep up the good work. I'm a huge fan of Mass Effect. Even got some of Jack's tattoos on me. Haha. Thanks. Oh man, that's cool. You should send us some pictures of those.
Damn, that's super cool.
Yeah, which tattoos did you get?
I'd love to see that.
You get like a sleeve or something? Yeah, we should take a look. So thank you to both of you guys, Dan and Drew. We really do appreciate it. All right, let's move on with the rest of the show.
Spit it out, or are you trying to build suspense?
You're so dense, sir. Obviously, I do not know as much about human relationships as I thought.
Yeah, so No Mercy in chat says, "So not this year, LOL." Yeah, we might get like a Dragon Age sooner than the next Mass Effect, which might be this year or next year. But yeah, we're probably still a ways out from the next Mass Effect game, unfortunately. But we'll keep you posted if we find any news about this or any leaks come out. You will hear it here first for sure. We'll let you know. All right, so now we're on to the Geth War. What's going on with that?
So the Geth aren't dumb. They're not dumb. They know what's going on. The Quarian government enacts martial law across the entire planet of Rannoch, and the government orders that all Geth are terminated. But this is not a static decree. Not all of the Quarians are monolithic. Not all of them agree. Some of the Quarians, in fact, sympathize with the Geth, and they try to defend them or hide them, because all of a sudden this becomes a very Holocaust-like situation if you view the Geth as legitimate life.
Right.
So if you view the Geth as legitimate life, all of a sudden now you have this oppressive government kicking in doors saying, "Give me your Geth," and then if you don't, well, you're going to be arrested or killed. And that is indeed what happens. The Quarians who don't agree to turn in the Geth or kill them themselves, and the Quarians who harbor the fugitives, they are arrested, imprisoned, or killed. And
it's such a tough question, and that's what's so great about these. One, is it legitimate life? 2, is it dangerous? Is it inherently dangerous? Is synthetic life inherently dangerous, and it will eventually wipe us out? If the answer to that is yes, then it's probably the right thing to do to get rid of them. Right?
It might be the logical thing.
It's the logic. Well, if it's 100%, think of it this way. If it's 100%, if there's 100% chance that every single time any race in the universe creates intelligent synthetic life, that will rebel and destroy its creator. wouldn't it be in the like we defend ourselves against other humans? Like, if I was to give an opposing army the information that they need to kill us, and there's 100% chance that they're going to come kill us, then it's our moral job to fight back against that in order to make sure that we survive. And that's humans. Now, it may not be our moral objective to destroy all other humans, but at least we need to do something to keep ourselves from being obliterated, right? Isn't that just part of survival?
Yeah, but I think that depends on a very key supposition, which was the first part of what you said. If right. That is how it turns out to be 100% of the time. And because we're organic, because we're fallible, we can't possibly say that is how it turns out 100% of the time. Right.
So of course, yeah, coexistence would be the better solution. But yeah, it's a tricky situation.
Or perhaps it turns out that way because we think that way.
Right. That makes sense. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So every biological race thinks that there's the potential for them to rebel and kill us because they're afraid of it, and therefore act aggressively, which spawns the outcome that you end up going to war with them and then they win. Like that could be a thing too. But yeah. So, okay. So what happens next?
So because the Geth are capable of teaching themselves and they learn exponentially faster than organic life, they realized what's going on, and some of the units armed themselves to defend the sympathetic Quarians, and some defended other Geth. So now you have just a week or two ago, I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not sure if that's the actual timeline, but very, very short time ago, the Quarian or the Geth start asking questions that are hallmarks of sentience. And now they're laying down their life for sympathetic Quarians. They're sacrificing their own life for other Geth. Mm-hmm. And I would expect them to do it for Quarians because it might be in their programming to defend their masters, so to speak. But to do it for other Geth implies that they value that other Geth as a life form.
Right. And it also raises the question, are they doing it out of sympathy? Are they doing it out of programming? Are they doing it because it's logically a good idea? Because it will make people think that they are sympathetic, that they have emotion, that they care? What's the difference between a psychopath who acts like they care and a person who actually cares? From the outside, it's very hard to tell.
Yeah, that's true. And I think at this point, because they're definitely an AI, everyone that's in a power position, such as the Quarian government, sees it as black and white. They see it as, we need to take care of this threat and we need to do it expeditiously, because if we don't, it's going to get worse. And funny that they would try to eliminate the Geth altogether very fast, because by 1895, the Geth sympathizers become so outnumbered that it becomes an all-out war, but a very fast one. Because by 1896, the very next year, the Geth have conquered Rannoch and the Quarian colonies. And in turn, they have committed counter-genocide. Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, all of this stuff is tough. What do you do when something is trying to wipe you out? At what point is it no longer defense and it's offense?
Well, maybe they could have slaughtered a few less Quarians, because they slaughtered all the billions of Quarians, and they stopped at a few million, which was apparently constitutes less than 1% of the pre-war Quarian population.
Yeah, that's
so less than 1% of that population survived this war. Right. That's how many Quarians died.
That sounds like genocide. That doesn't sound like
that's genocide.
A defense. That sounds like we have to destroy them, which seems in line with the same kind of reasoning that I was playing with earlier. Of now, the Geth, if they know the Quarians have said, we will destroy all of you, have 100%, it's no longer an if. They know that it is mandated by this other race that they be destroyed, that genocide happened to them. So are they justified in committing genocide against their aggressors, knowing that their aggressors will never quit until they are completely destroyed?
Maybe, but they could never take the moral high ground. They never could.
Right.
Even afterward, they could never say, well, we were right in doing it.
But were they necessary in doing it?
Well, the interesting thing is that I think the Geth are aware of these moral complications and these conundrums from, okay, well, if we eliminated all of the Quarians, we wouldn't have the moral justification to say what they were doing was wrong. Right. So
we at least have to leave some.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. So they leave some, and those survivors board starships, and those starships eventually travel to the Citadel, and they appeal to the Council for help. The Council denies the help. They strip the Quarians of their embassy for violating Council law on the creation of AI. Mm-hmm. And the Geth could have pursued these survivors. They could have wiped all the Quarians out, but they didn't. And later during Legion's mission in Mass Effect 3, it's revealed to the player that the sacrifice of those Quarians who had opposed martial law and the termination order were archived and honored by the Geth, even if the Quarians themselves had basically forgotten about them. Because it's a shame it's a stain on your reputation if you're a Quarian, if you had a family member that was a sympathizer for the Geth, that tried to hide the Geth and protect them. That's a really huge stain on your reputation. So the Quarians try to bury that, but the Geth honor it in the archives.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
It's just kind of crazy because you don't know whether the Geth are predicting political ramifications, or you don't know if they genuinely feel those morals that say, okay, annihilating an entire race is wrong and we can't be as bad as they are. Right.
Or maybe they calculated that they needed to there's the third option here, and I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate in order to get the conversation going. But what if you know 100% that the Quarians are coming to destroy you and your people, and so therefore you ask the question of, well, can we 100% destroy them in order to remove that threat? There may be the third option of, what will it take to disarm them? And maybe that becomes a calculation of, well, not genocide, but what if we kill X percentage of them in order to disarm their ability to ever stand up to us again? And that could be calculated. That could be a number. If we take them down to 1% of their population, then they're never going to have the population to then stand up against us again, and we are now safe. But like you're saying, maybe there's other calculations involved. They're highly intelligent. They learn faster than these other biological races. Maybe there's a thought about how other people will perceive it. Maybe they're combing the archives of history in order to see what things happen and how they play out, and they're playing dice with an option that they think is going to be the most likely one to fall on their favor.
If we wanted to be able to point to one side and say, this side is the right side, this side is the victim, this side acted justly and rightly, then I think all of that depends on the attempts at diplomacy during the Geth War. How often did the Geth reach out to the Quarians and say, okay, look, we're kicking your ass left and right, but you need to stop, because otherwise we're just going to annihilate you. But please stop. We don't want to do that.
So how
many times did they say that?
What is that? Do we know?
There's nothing written about it.
Yeah.
And even if they did that, would it fall on deaf ears? Would the Quarians say, I'm not going to take an ultimatum from the thing I just created?
Right. Yeah. How many times in literature or in movies do you have like the proud people standing and saying, we'll never submit to you. Ha ha ha. We'll fight to the end. And it's like, we don't want to have to destroy you, but we're going to keep fighting until none of us are left alive. Well, if that's what you want, that's not what we want. But if you keep coming, we're going to keep defending ourselves. There's a lot of gray in this. It's a really, really cool concept because there is a lot of gray.
I'm interested as to why. So the Geth allow the Quarians to escape. And then after that, instead of pursuing total annihilation, the Geth actually stay isolated in the Perseus Veil, which is the nebula where Rannoch is. And they stay isolated to the extent that they attack or destroy any attempt at contact from organic life outside the Perseus Veil.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Maybe because they've realized that they can't trust organic life.
Is it a self-preservation tactic, or I wonder if it's to retain some type of moral high ground? Like, hey, we felt so bad about almost annihilating an entire species that we realized we couldn't be trusted around that species.
Right.
So we just,
right. Yeah, we are so powerful
ourselves.
that, and we are a moral race, and so we don't want to end up in a situation where we have to do this again.
Exactly. So is that what they were doing? Regardless, the council sends a fleet to the edge of the Veil to prepare just in case the Geth launch an invasion. They keep the fleet there for, as far as I know, until Mass Effect 3, when it looks like the Reapers are sending out code to the Geth to get them to attack. But I think it's kind of telling that without the Reapers' influence in Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 3, without the Reapers' indoctrinating influence, the Geth don't attack organics after that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't.
Yeah. Left to their own, they're peaceful.
Yeah. And no one really knows what they're doing or what they're waiting for. But they swarm the entire planet of Rannoch, and they keep it covered in so many space stations that when you look at it with thermal imaging, you can't actually see the planet. It's all space stations and Geth.
That's awesome. that's cool.
So yeah, that could also be an intel tactic. But basically, this leaves us with a legacy. And this is becoming a common theme. I like doing the legacy at the very end because it kind of leaves you with, okay, what's the context of the situation that I'm walking into in Mass Effect 1? And the situation that you're walking into is now there was a preconceived fear of synthetic life before this. And now there's a galaxy-wide like paranoia about synthetic life and AI. But now there's also a condemnation of the Quarians for unleashing it upon the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And the Quarians have to rework their entire socio-political economic structure. Their entire civilization has to get completely reworked because now they operate out of a migrant fleet of ships. And that government that runs that migrant fleet of ships, I'm not sure what the government of Rannoch was like. I don't know if it was democratic or whatnot. It didn't seem to be, but but what we do know is that the government of the migrant fleet most closely resembles a military tribunal where the largest ship's captains run the entire government. And the Quarians become nomadic. And it's nomadic to the point that they strip mine planets as they pass by. So That's how much fuel and resources the entire fleet needs. And they institute a one-child policy to make sure they're never consuming more than they're bringing in.
Wow. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. A race that's totally required or totally dependent on technology and that cannot survive outside of their technological boundaries would require a lot of resources.
And there's also no criminal justice system in the migrant fleet. I looked that up as well because I was curious about it. And apparently the criminal justice system is if you've committed a crime that's bad enough, when they pass by the next planet, they're dropping you off. And that's it.
That's it. Get off the boat. See ya.
Because they literally can't be bothered with spending more resources to punish this person. But they don't, as far as I know, they don't jettison them out airlocks or anything like that. I mean, maybe they do for a serial killer. I'm not sure. But they also become, so this vulnerability and this skill set, it leads Quarians to being viewed as second-class vagrants. And because of their skill set, which includes, being amazing technological repair experts, especially with ship repair, from having lived on the migrant fleet.
Right.
Because of that, they end up becoming exploited laborers, which, if you can't find the poetic justice there, the irony that they just hundreds of years ago they created a artificial intelligence, and then they tried to keep that artificial intelligence enslaved and exploit labor from them. And now the Quarians are exploited laborers, and they're viewed as vagrants and second-class citizens.
Yeah, they've become the very thing that they were trying to replace with
what goes around comes around.
Things. Yeah. It's there's kind of a gypsy kind of thing going on with the whole nomad being specialized in very specific things kind of thing too. You can kind of make a connection there. And, you know, kind of universally being maybe mistrusted or hated in certain types of areas. Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, very, very cool. We've brought up a lot of different topics, a lot of different concepts in this, as will happen regularly on this show, but would love to hear your thoughts on these things. I don't know. There's never an easy answer. It's not like there's a clear, well, this is obviously the thing they should have done, because there's always a what if. There's always a, you know, like there are always more things than you don't know than you do know. It's the Einsteinian bubble, right? Everything, if you know everything inside the bubble, then the actual surface area of the bubble is bigger than the bubble. And as the bubble gets bigger, the surface area grows exponentially. There's just so much more that we don't know. Like, can you trust a synthetic AI? Is it going to be moral? Does it even have an understanding of what morality is? You know, and even among human beings, we can't agree on what things are moral and what things aren't, or where morality comes from. Some people think you're only moral if you're religious, or if you're of a specific religion, or if you're not religious. You know, like some people think you're moral simply because you're a human being, and so you have a basic drive towards it, but it depends on nurture. It depends on how you were raised. You know, there's so many variables. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this stuff. Feel free to send us a tweet or jump on the Robots Radio Discord. There's a channel. There's lots of chat already going on in there, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Any last thoughts, Sam?
Don't try to create AI, I guess. I just don't mess with it. I mean, you know, here's another law lesson from Legend for council law. There's a reason why most of these regulations exist. So just don't mess with them. Unless you feel like creating an epic trilogy that might not end too well. I'm not sure. Those are pretty much my thoughts. Yeah.
Right. Are there any stories with AI where things turn out good? I don't know that.
If you chose the green ending, I think in Mass Effect 3, maybe that's the way that it ends well. I'm not sure, but
yeah, but thinking about other books and movies and things, usually if it's a story about AI, it's a story about it's a warning about the creation of it and the exploitation of it or the dangers of it. Yeah, Alexa. Yeah, Alexa's not really an AI. There's no real thinking going on there yet. That's a funny joke. As far as we know, who knows? Oh man. Yeah. So lots of deep stuff. So, would love to hear your thoughts on this stuff. Well, let's wrap it up. Sam, you doing anything else cool? Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I'm going to be streaming this week Mass Effect 1, still with Commander K. Shepard. We're getting so close to the point where A, I have to move, and B, after my move, Mass Effect Legendary Edition is coming out. And we're getting so close to it and I've seen so many cool things from it that I kind of want to just pause and pick it up with Legendary Edition. Yeah. Just because it looks so good. Like,
that's what this guy's doing. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen any of the videos or the video comparisons or the articles on it, but man, Legendary looks amazing.
Yeah, there was one where they just listed all the different effects that weren't in the original series that are now in the original series. You know, things like subsurface scattering of light on skin, or it's not just like, higher res textures and better light. It's like all sorts of stuff. And some of those scenes are just beautiful. Some of the planets, and not just the characters. I mean, the characters' faces and things are better, but you look at some of the scenery and, you know, the specular lighting and the density, stuff in the air and the way that the texture works with it and the colors, and it's beautiful, beautiful stuff. Let's see. I've got all my regular stuff going on. You know what? One thing that's kind of fun to talk about before we go. I been looking for a new TV show to jump into, and I started The Expanse. Have you watched The Expanse, Sam?
I have not.
It's
I've
on
heard of it.
Amazon. Yeah, I guess it's in its 5th season now, so I'm a little bit late getting into it. What a freaking cool show. So The Expanse is in the near future, where Earth has settled on Mars and is in the process of terraforming Mars. And there are people on Ceres, which is one of the space stations located in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And they're mining the belt for water and resources and things. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but it's not like Star Trek. It's more like, what's the show with the Cylons? Battlestar. It's more like Battlestar Galactica in that, like, there's very real situations going on with politics, but then also like the having to be in space and what happens if your ship is, runs out of power, or how you're able to patch a hole in the wall, by a railgun that runs through their ship, and how the air gets sucked out, or like it's cool stuff. It's like, watch the first few episodes. It's a smart enough show that it doesn't tell you everything. It lets you try to put together even like acronyms for stuff. It doesn't, somebody doesn't say, oh, that's the Interplanetary Space Station, blah, 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 blah. And somebody else goes, oh, you mean the IS whatever, in order for you to be like, oh, okay, every time I hear IS whatever, it means this.
I hate it when they break the fourth wall with a writing like that.
Right. There's none of that. So it's a lot of like, okay, who is this character? Is there a relation between them and anyone else that I should know about? Is there like, who is this? What is this faction? How does this actually work? You're piecing all of it together. So you have to pay attention. So it's good, but speaking of space stuff, it's getting me like very much in the whole, like, want to go back into space. Like, I want to play some Mass Effect. I wish Starfield might be coming out later this year. That's going to be freaking awesome. Like Star Citizen, I wish that was further along in development, because that'd be really cool to do too. I don't want more space stuff. So if you're looking for more space stuff, go check out The Expanse. It's on Amazon. All right, but that's it. Other than that, I've got my regular streams throughout the week, usually in the afternoons, like 3:30, or in the evenings. And I don't have a regular schedule, but if you want to hang out with me, just make sure you follow the channel, maybe turn on notifications, because if I do stream to play games other than, doing podcasts and stuff, it'll be at one of those times, usually during the weekdays. And we've also got the Robots Radio Rocket Club, and we're now up to 11 members. These are shows that I'm working with to help them launch successful podcasts. So if you're interested in that, check out robotsradio.net/rocket-club. Always happy to bring on more people, some really creative people, and we all get together and talk every week. So you get to meet the other creators, learn from them as well. A lot of cool stuff going on. So go check that out.
Oh, yeah. And next week, I forgot to bring up what we're going to be covering next week.
Yeah.
So we're going to start a brand new set of episodes detailing the various intelligent races of Mass Effect. So it's going to be like a series of profile features. And we're going to begin with the Protheans.
Protheans. Can we do unintelligent races of Mass Effect 2?
Absolutely.
I
don't know which one the Yogg would fall into, but
can we do like,
which one do the humans fall into?
I don't know. Can we do like types of rocks? Like on this planet, they have this type of rock, which is not found on any other planet in the galaxy. No, I don't know that would be. I don't think there's enough information about that kind of thing, but I could be surprised. There might be. For some of it.
Top 10 subterranean levels of Mass Effect 2.
Subterranean levels. Yeah. Number of star systems with more than one sun.
Why the Varen would totally make a great house pet, and you should definitely let me get it, babe.
Wait, they sell those? Yeah. We can get those? Where do you find those?
No, but that'd be awesome.
Oh, man. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, our live chat friends, for being here. You guys are awesome. Yes, no mercy. The Protheans are. Yes, we'll just, if you're not here, you're missing out on that comment. We'll see you guys next week. Until then, stay safe. Talk to you later. Bye. Thanks for tuning into the Mass Effect Lorecast. We'd love to hear your opinion and thoughts on the lore of Mass Effect. Reach out to us on Twitter at Mass Effect Cast, or check out the Robots Radio Discord. Also, you can send us an email at masseffectlorecast@gmail.com.